All right, let's just get it out of the way. The Miami Heat win outright tonight, and we move back here to no, that's not no. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. Then welcome in the NBA tip-off show. There's Jimmy. Jimmy might just happen to make an appearance at a club after tonight's game is over, which rather should be rather quickly though. But we joke. We have two games here tonight, two more game twos to go through here. Miami in Boston, taking on the Celtics. It's actually a lower number than we thought it would be. Plus, we do have some line movement in that game we're going to discuss. And then, of course, the nightcap game, too. New Orleans taking on OKC, which, quite honestly, a little bit head-scratching with that line as well. And here to help us navigate through the craziness that is the NBA playoffs is a man that has yet to lose in the NBA playoffs here. Double R1L, Steve Merril in the house, ready to go here tonight for what should be, well, one of the games should be interesting, but both, Merril, according to the market, you would think neither of these games are going to be very competitive here tonight, but we know better because it is the NBA playoffs. The Miami-Boston game, 14.5, as high as 15, total 205.5. I'm kind of shocked the total's where it's at. I did think we'd get a little more love here to the over. Opened at 207. Anything surprise you about where the numbers are at right now in this one?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't think any moves to the under in the betting market should shock us on the totals. Teddy and the Prez actually talked about this right before I came on WagerTalk today, and I weighed in as well earlier. Watch the replay here, of course, on WagerTalk TV. But the unders have been cashing as much as home teams have been cashing. And whenever you see something that extreme, the markets have to react. And we've really seen this under trend ever since the All-Star break. The second half began and defense came to play. But as you and I talked about a couple nights ago here on the show, whenever you have a huge overreaction one way, it has to come back the other way. You know, the betting market should be 50-50. The point spread is the great equalizer. And over the last several seasons, we saw a lot of high-scoring games. We saw overs cashing. The odds makers were forced to bump totals in the regular season higher than we've ever seen on average. And now everything's coming crashing back down. That bubble has burst, if you will. I think there is still some value with some unders. And what I like to do is to go back and rescore and look at the pace of play. And I didn't think the pace was that fast in game one. Now, the problem becomes when you have a big favorite like this, you get the blowout factor. Two ways that can go. A team can run away with it, or they can take their foot off the gas. And that's kind of what Boston did. They had the 34-point lead, ended up winning by only 20, but they never trailed. Kind of speeds the game up, keeps the clock moving, just like in football when a team is up big. And also you get less fouls. So I don't want to read too much into that box score from game one. I really do think the Heat, your Miami Heat, and the under are somewhat correlated, because I can't imagine Miami's going to go out there and try to win an offensive slugfest, especially without their best player. I'm not big on parlays, but I do think Heat and under are correlated for a few reasons. That's one of them. And the other reason is if a 14.5-point dog covers, the game probably, if it's lower scoring, gives them a better chance of covering. So I do think the Heat and the under are somewhat correlated, depending on how you think this game plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be, and I think the start to it is maybe going to be a big tell to this, right? No surprise that the Celtics came out the way they did in game one, right? It was clear by the second quarter, Merril, that there was a significant difference in the three-point shooting there. For Miami to make some adjustments here, they can either make more threes or they're going to have to defend the perimeter better. And the problem with going zone like they do is that it oftentimes leaves an extra guy wide open in the corner or beyond the perimeter, and they made them pay. So do you think Spo and Miami will come out and try anything different here, or do you think they're going to continue to go zone and give the Celtics the opportunity to make some threes and hope they don't make nearly as many as they did in the first game?
It's funny, Joe, that you said zone, because when you and I were growing up, we weren't allowed to play zone in the NBA. Remember, it was illegal, and that's something that's changed with all these three-point shots. I mean, there's players that are making more threes in a season than teams used to make overall 30, 40 years ago. And it has obviously changed the game. And it's another reason, by the way, those totals have become so jacked up and high scoring in recent years, because the game has changed. Now, Boston takes a lot of threes. They average 43 three-pointers a game on the season. So we shouldn't be shocked that they took 49. It's just a little bit above average. but they did hit 22 of those 49 versus just 17 during the regular season on average. And I think you had a good point there. The defense wasn't quite there, and it was a difficult scheduling spot for Miami. They lost the game against Philly on Wednesday, which, keep in mind, that game was a day later because the Flyers were playing Tuesday. And then they had to travel back home in the true must-win on Friday without Butler now in the lineup. A lot of energy. They had the easy win at home against a bad Bulls team. They were the only below 500 team in the whole play-in, even postseason picture. And then they had to travel to Boston on just one day's rest and face a Celtics team who they had a 3-0 lead on last year and beat to make the NBA Finals. That was a huge revenge spot for Boston. Now, granted, they might not take their foot off the gas here in Game 2, but I do think a letdown is more likely now than it was possibly in Game 1. And Miami just really had no energy left, and that showed on the defensive side, and that's why they did give up that kind of shooting from three-point range. With that said, though, one thing that gives hope for Heat fans is that they were plus 20 inside the paint, which is really remarkable if you think about it, to lose a game by 20 points and to outscore your opponent by 20 from the paint. Now, you don't see that too often. And that's because Boston was plus 30 points from three-point range. That means the Heat outscored them from 2-point range of the free throw line. So, yeah, I think you're right. The three-point shooting is going to be the factor here. In these one-game scenarios like the NCAA tournament, it's always hard to predict, but I do think I can confidently say Boston will probably not make 22 three-pointers again tonight.
Well, and that's it, Merril. That's why, and it's always good to see Seth showing up in the chat room, because he did point out that along with the zone issues we had growing up, apparently you were also playing into a peach basket, and that was your net there. So, Seth, very quality pointing out by you there.
I'm not even the oldest guy on the screen right now. Was he talking to you or me, Joe Raineri?
I wasn't talking to your peach basket. Listen, at least South brought it right up to you. Don't bring me into your shenanigans. Outstanding job as always.
I think Seth is confused.
I
think there's some day drinking going on.
Into the peach basket.
George is getting upset.
Yeah, there is some day drinking. Absolutely. We are getting, by the way, those of you joining us live here today in the chat room, shout out to all of you. Instagram in the house. Justin Boom 07's got a couple of interesting props on Instagram that we'll go ahead and take a look at until he starts drinking, and then Lord knows exactly what happens over there. We also have, of course, YouTube Shorts. Those of you on your cell watching us vertically, we appreciate you, including Seth and G Hertz, who's also got a couple of interesting props we'll talk about. And then, of course, Big Daddy and the crew, Catch You Slipping and company here. Gentlemen, always a pleasure to see you here. I will say this here, though, Merril, because, the zigzag used to be quite the profitable betting trend over the years. It ran a little stagnant over the last couple because of the threes, but they really are the great equalizer in a series like this. You mentioned rest. You mentioned maybe a little fatigue. I'd also like to point out that until about the last minute and a half of that game, Merril, that there was no guarantee Boston was covering that game. And they had everything going for them until Miami started doing what? Well, started making some threes. And then all of a sudden, the game changed. So we say it all the time. There is no 20-point lead. I don't give a crap what team it is. There's no 20-point lead safe in the NBA anymore. And this is a ton of points that you're asking for a Miami team who had a couple of days to get acclimated here and knows what they have to do in order to stay in this one.
Yeah, I mean, the three-point shooting is a great equalizer, and it's the real random variance in any one-game scenario. Now, and in the NBA, we have the best of 7. That's why the Celtics aren't going to lose this series. I'll come out right now and say that. Whether they lose a game, perhaps, probably not. Whether they cover all the games, probably less likely. And I think if there's one game which Miami has a chance of covering, it's tonight for those reasons that Boston just needs the win. They don't need to embarrass them anymore. That was the game one, was the revenge spot, in my opinion. And also, what happens when it's a big lead? Do you really have to embarrass them again, or do you rest up and get ready for the trip down to Miami? Of course, the Heat might take the same approach, but I still think if both teams put backups in or take their foot off the gas, I think that favors the team that's down big to kind of get some garbage points. Ralph Michaels sent this over to me this morning because he knew I was going to be talking about this game here. And Ralph and I will be on tomorrow's show here with you live at 4:00 Eastern. Always enjoy that because he has a lot of the trends and stats and database info. But going into this past season, going into last season, round one favorites in this range, 12 or more point favorites, big favorites, were 30-14 against the spread. So that gives you some concern that Boston could get it done again. But as Ralph pointed out, 0-3 last year. So maybe that trend is starting to turn. And another reason I think the zigzag hasn't worked as well in recent years as on the blind for the last decade or so is because these games are higher scoring. There are more 3-point shots. And we have seen just the home favorites in general and the teams off of winning game ones do very well in the first round in games too. That is not something we used to see when I started in the 90s, the early 2000s. So once again, you can buck the trends both ways here. The Heat are obviously up against it, but I do think there's some reasons to think they can maybe hang within this big number.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, Tyler Hero's got to. They need more of a concerted effort. I mean, honestly, I was looking on the back of milk cartons for Caleb Martin in that game because until he actually took out Tatum at the end there, I didn't even know he was playing in the game. That's how useless he was. But Caleb Martin can't go MIA for 3 quarters here. Tyler Hero, they can't go through, and this is another thing with Miami. They can't go through these 3, 4, 5-minute stretches, Merril, where they can't get a bucket. And then, they did a great job, I thought, rebounding Miami. I thought they did a really good job in and around the paint. Miami for the most part, Boston for the most part was taking threes because that's what Miami was giving them. And if there is any regression to this, this was a game where they took their foot off the gas in the fourth quarter a tad bit, although all the starters were still playing there, Merril, for Boston. And that allowed Miami to get hot with Wright coming off the bench and some guys making buckets. And all of a sudden, 15, 14 points wasn't nearly enough. That was a big sweat job. So I would instead of running to the window, I think there's some other ways you can approach this thing, even if you like Boston. And let's start with some of the team totals in this aspect here. And the thing that jumped out to me this morning was Miami 93.5 points as a team total, Merril. Now, listen, they were this close to going over 100 points in that first game if they didn't go a couple of stretches without being able to hit some wide open shots. You're asking Miami to get over 93.5 points. I don't think Boston can do anything better defensively than what we saw, or do you think they can?
So these teams played 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. I believe Miami got over that total in every one of those games rather easily. I think 97 was their lowest, and they had a 99. So first of all, they did it last year in 7 straight games. They've played in the regular season 3 times this year. They got into the 110 range in all 3 of those games, and they got to 94 in the blowout loss in game 1. And they had 45 at the half, so that kind of was on the pace pretty much for the low 90s. The only problem I have, though, is I do lean a little bit under in the game. Even though this line is really low, it was 210 in game 1, and you mentioned how the huge adjustment down here, down to 205 as low as 205 in some spots. And I do think if you look at the shooting percentages in game 1, Boston and Miami shot 48 and 47%. They combined to go 20 for 22 from the free throw line, and we talked about the Celtics being 45% from 3, and it still landed 208, stayed under the 210. So I do lean under for that reason. I'd get it to the low 200s, maybe the 190s. But I do think the Miami team total is a little low. So it's a little bit of contradiction there. The other thing I'd like to point out is what you said, is that the 44 to 24 points in the paint just jumps out to you for a team that lost by 20 to have a 20-point edge. But part of the reason is they're giving up those 3-point shots, and obviously that bit them. So if you can predict Boston hits the 3 again, and that is their game. I mean, it's a bad matchup for Miami. The other thing I'll ask you, Joe, you're a Heat fan. You follow him closer than I do. Who picks up the load for Butler? I mean, I think from a player prop perspective, you can start to find some value maybe. Obviously Hero's got to do better than 4 for 13. So I do think maybe there's some upside with him. He took a lot of shots. Jaquez, the rookie, 16 shot attempts, and then Abayo had 18 shot attempts. So those guys were getting a lot of looks at least.
Yeah, you know what it is? I think you need to get a bigger performance from S. Warrior in the chat room. Because he, too, has been MIA. I don't know why I'm being left out on an island here, Merril, to rep Miami here. The guy is absolutely he shows up the last 3 minutes of the show and just goes, all right, are we all on Miami? It's like,
so why are you concerned that he's not there yet? We're nowhere close to the
because I need all the help we can get, just like Miami does. I'll tell you this. I think Caleb Martin has got to come out with a better game. His number is low. And I think it was a great point in the chat that we saw here for those looking at Miami props. Kevin Love's, I believe his PRA was a pretty low number in game one. I think John Finley had mentioned that, 11.5. He's gone over that. I think he's probably a good bet to look at as far as that goes. Caleb Martin over 7.5 total points is what that number was this morning. He has got to be a guy that shows up. I don't know what's going on with Terry Rozier. I don't know why he can't rub some dirt on that damn neck and get back in there, but he is nowhere to be found. Scary Terry is not so scary if he ain't playing, Merrill. But I do think that Caleb Martin, and Tyler Hero is going to take his shots. I think Duncan Robinson is got to make a few from the outside. So collectively, I think they need to have a big game from the outside. I thought of all the guys, I thought Bam Adebayo handled it pretty well there in the first game, especially defensively. But I think Caleb Martin and Duncan Robinson have to be the guys here. And if Caleb Martin don't get over 7.5 points, Merrill, as a prop, I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be lights out again and maybe really early. Who were some of the guys you were looking at prop betting wise here? I know a lot of guys think Tatum is overvalued. I agree. I would go to maybe Derek White or Porzingis if you were looking for that. Who were you focusing in on?
Yeah, my concern with Martin is he's had 7 or less points now in 4 of his last 5 games. So to get to that 7.5, 8 range, he'd have to overachieve. I love where you're going. No pun intended. I love where you're going with Kevin Love. And that is somebody I wanted to mention. I forgot to mention him actually in my standalone video. I do, by the way, as you know, the viewers out there hopefully know, I'm doing every single game every day for the next 2 months, every playoff game, deep dive the night before, up early each morning. And I'm giving a lot of player prop info in those videos. And I forgot to mention Love in the video for this game last night. So that's why I love doing the TV show here live on the day of the games. Kevin Love jumped out to me on Friday night last week in that Bulls game. And that was the first time Butler was out. And look what he does. All of a sudden, he scores 16 points. This is a guy that for the season averages about 8.5, I think, a game. He scores 16 in that Bulls game. He only plays 13 minutes on Sunday, and he gets 7 points still, goes over the 5.5. And this is a guy that's now quietly had 7 points or more in 5 of his last 6. The only game he didn't was when he didn't score against Toronto, didn't play much. He's had 7 or more in the other 5 games, in double digits in 3 of those. 4 of those 5, he's had 10 or more. So I like Kevin Love over 6. That's a rate. It's anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5, so shop around. And he's a playoff veteran, and I think they're going to rely on him more in the postseason like they kind of started to do last year. And with Butler out, there's an extra 48 minutes to be split, which means he gets a handful of more minutes. We saw that in that Chicago Bull game where he had 16. So I think Kevin Love props over, points, whatever you want to look at, make a lot of sense. Rebounds as well, points and rebounds, however you want to cut it.
So Eric in the chat, Have, catch it. There's a lot of load management talk, I think, or something to that reference going on in the chat room. You sick SOBs in there. I'll tell you that right now. But I am seeing some love here for some of the team totals. We told you with Miami, 93.5 was this morning. I'm seeing 94.5 now on DraftKings. But the Celtics team total, also interesting, Merril, and I would take it even further. I know there is a contingency of people who believe just bet the Celtics first half, look for another opportunity to get into them live in game. They have been the best first half team against the spread all year long. They have been absolutely phenomenal, especially at home. I think it was 9.5 the first half spread for Boston, but more or less their team total 55.5, 56.5, Merrill, somewhere in there. They dropped 60 on Miami in the first game. Should we have confidence enough to just be like, hey, lay it with them in the first half, and more importantly, expect about 60 points here in the first half, especially if it's raining threes?
So they've scored 59 or more in all 4 meetings this year, including the 60 they put up in game 1. Something I forgot to mention, too, last year, Miami wins those first 3 games in upset fashion. All 3 went over. Then Boston wins 3 of the next 4. They all stay under. In fact, it was Miami over for 3 straight, Boston under for the next 3 straight, cover, win straight up. And then game 7, Miami did win, but it stayed under. Game 7's often due later in the playoffs, though, so that's a little bit of a different situational setup. So I mentioned earlier, I thought Miami and the under are somewhat correlated, but it wasn't the case last year. So we'll see how that plays out. It all comes out if the Celtics want to rout them because they're the best team in the NBA. They're much better than Miami, especially without Butler. And maybe they do. They blew the first 3 games last year. So even though they got their revenge on Sunday with an easy win, maybe they don't take their foot off the gas. So it's going to come down to if Boston's hitting their threes or not. I do like the fact Miami was scoring down low and had the paint edge. That tells me they can compete at least physically. But it's going to come down if they're making threes or not. But when you're getting a 14.5, 15-point dog, you have a little bit of leeway in case they are hitting some threes. So I feel more comfortable with that side.
Yep, 8.5 right now is what the chat rooms are telling us. They got Jaime from Justin Boom 07. Jaime Jaquez. We haven't mentioned him much. I know there's some resistance from YouTube in regards to his PRA, which I believe is somewhere around 15 or 14 and a half points, rebounds, and assists. Listen, the kid has been absolutely phenomenal for them here. He's a big game player. The kid has stepped up, and he was another one. You mentioned it earlier. Who does Miami need to show up and show out here tonight with no Jimmy Butler? Well, Jaime Jaquez has got to handle his business defensively, as well as shooting the bucket there. And I love the kid because he's not afraid to get some of those physical points. Like, he's not afraid to bang around in the beginning. Great hustle plays. I wouldn't mind taking a shot at him either, because I do think he's going to have one of these games, whether it's this one or the first one at home, Merril, where Jaime Jaquez is going to show up and show out, and he's going to be a dominant player. And I think he's been pretty damn good thus far for Miami in this spot.
Yeah, I actually believe I mentioned Jaquez in my video earlier. I like him over. So that is a guy I touched on him overnight video. And a couple of things I pointed out. First of all, he got 16 shot attempts in game 1. That was the second most behind Adebayo. So I do think he's getting more shot attempts with Butler out. Did not even get to the free throw line. 0 for 0 and 0 for 2 from 3. So all 16 points came from his 8 field goal attempts, and he still got to 16, which got him very close to his total. His total was, I believe, 12 and a half, and he got to 16 points. Now it's 14 and a half. So we have seen him bump at a full basket, but I would still lean over. And if you look at his last 5 games, he has scored 15 or more 5 straight games, including 15, 16, 18, 20, and 21. And now Butler's out. So I like Jaquez over for points. By the way, the PRA is 22 and a half. His points rebounds is 19 and a half. And he's gotten to at least 20 or more 5 straight games there. So this guy's gone over now 5 straight points, 5 straight points and rebounds. And I think there's a reason to like it even more because he got a lot of shot attempts in game 1 and Butler's out.
Yeah, no, I do like it here tonight. I think there's a lot of great ways, the bottom line, that you can approach this Miami and Boston game. And I don't think there's any need for you to have to lay 15, 14 and a half, Merril, if you like Boston. I think there's plenty of other ways that you can back the Celtics here tonight without having to just lay the 15 and then find yourself sweating it out in the final minute and a half again going, you got to be kidding me, Boston. You had a 20-point lead. Now all of a sudden we're sweating out you to be able to hold on here. So I think the first half is a decent way to look at this game, whether it be points. First quarter points, by the way, 28 and a half for the Celtics. Miami has not had a great first quarter so far here, Merril, and I believe 23 and a half is what their first quarter total points are. I got to believe Miami's going to come out and bomb away. They're going to try to get in rhythm early, and this could very well be a situation where it slows down late, but it gets on fire early with points. So not a bad way to look at that as well. We do have another game. Don't forget, game after this one, a game 2 in which Oklahoma City is getting ready to take on New Orleans. Now, Oklahoma City obviously handled business late, Merril. They did what they needed to do to be able to win that game. But I will say this. If New Orleans wins the rebounding battle again by the 52-44, but what was really impressive is I think the number was 36 or 37% of their missed shots they ended up getting. And that is not a good recipe for Oklahoma City here, because if that's the case, the Pelicans, if you keep giving them opportunities, they will bury you. Very physical team, I thought, in that game. They obviously were the only ones to actually cover in the game ones, but Oklahoma City's going to have to start banging around and getting some of these rebounds. Otherwise, New Orleans is winning this game.
Yeah, 18-8 on offensive rebounds for New Orleans.
Yeah.
So, we talk a lot about turnovers in football, errors in baseball. You don't see a lot of errors at high level Major League Baseball, like one or two games. As a coach of a 12U team, I see a tremendous amount of errors, and I call them extra outs. And
good point.
I mean, you literally get 6 or 7 outs in an inning when you're watching like Little League Baseball. So that's a form of turnover. But turnovers in basketball we know about. But what about offensive rebounds? What a turnover is it's taking away a chance to score. It's one less possession. But an offensive rebound is basically a reverse turnover. It's an extra possession. They had 10 more chances to score off a miss of their own. And figure if they hit 50%, which is the league average, you're going to get another 10 points on the blind. And even with that edge, they still lost by 2. So 2 ways to look at it. Yes, if they continue to have the offensive rebounding edge, just like if Boston hits their threes, they're going to be in this game. I'm kind of taking the opposite. This is one of the times I don't think the zigzag works. And one of the reasons the zigzag works more times than not is because the losing team has to make an adjustment. Things aren't working. The other team overlooks them. That's not going to be the case here. New Orleans did a lot of things right. That's why they covered the point spread, almost pulled the upset. They don't need to make too many adjustments. Brandon Ingram well below his average, and they only lost by 2. Whereas OKC, I think, will be the team making the adjustments, even though they won the game. So I like them to win by margin in this one. And then on top of that, we're getting adjusted line value, which is crazy. This is the team that was an 8.5-point favorite in game 1. Now it's only 7.5 in a lot of spots. And oh, by the way, I failed to mention this last night in my video, and I keep forgetting to mention it, but the public is on both underdogs. Miami's getting a little bit of public love, which makes me a little less lukewarm on them. But the most public dog tonight is the Pelicans. I would actually call them an official public dog. So OKC, the number 1 seed, off a subpar performance at home now, is not getting much attention, and we're getting a discounted price because of it. So I do like OKC the more I look at this game. And, it's a 1 versus 8 without their best player technically on the 8 seed. So my concern for Oklahoma City is the lack of playoff experience. But, Joe, I think that showed more in game 1. Now they have a game under their belt. They escaped with the win. I think that's actually setting up a better play on them tonight.
Yeah, and I'll say this. For as competitive as they were, Merril, Ingram sucked. McCollum was 2 of 9 from deep. So, if you think maybe they come back to life a little bit here, they're not going to be able to win this series, much less win tonight on the road if Brandon Ingram doesn't figure it out here. But they need McCollum in some way, shape, or form. I know a lot of guys were talking, Trey, Murphy in the prop betting market here, but you need a big game from McCollum or Ingram here. I almost feel as if it's correlated with those 2 guys. If you like New Orleans, not only to cover, but to somehow or another win this game outright, it better be because McCollum or Ingram are having big nights.
Yeah, what I like to look for at the props are guys that took a lot of shots but didn't hit many of them because they're going to come back to their league average. And Ingram definitely qualifies in that regard. He took 17 attempts. He only made 5. No threes. Only got to the free throw line twice in the entire game. And he ended up with just 12 points. The problem, though, is that his point total is about 19.5, and he has been well under this in his 4. He's been back for 4 games in April since going out in late March, and he has scored 13 or less in 3 of those 4 games. The only one he didn't was 24 against Sacramento, which was the big elimination game. That's my concern. I'm just not sure Ingram's fully there yet, and I kind of need to see something to make sure. But otherwise, you would expect a bounce back. McCollum actually had the most shot attempts for anybody on the Pelicans. He had 22.
Yeah.
He was 9 for 22, got 20 points, but he once again did not get to the free throw line at all, and he was only 2 for 9 from 3-point range, and he still got 20 points, fell right under his 20.5, and now you look, the odds makers have it set at 21. He, though, also scored just 7 and 9 the 2 games before that. So a lot of inconsistency for these Pelicans, which makes the player prop market kind of tricky. By the way, Trey Murphy, the third, who you referenced, played the most minutes of anybody. He had 44 to 48 minutes. He got to 21 points, 5 for 12 from 3. He took a lot of 3-pointers. He hit 5 of the 12 and got over 16.5 at 21 points. He's priced around 17 now. Once again, 5 for 12. If he takes that many threes just on average, he's going to get some points again, probably.
Yeah, I know. There's also the big fade is on for Josh Giddey, who is seeing less and less time on the floor in this series, mostly because if they're going to want to get out and run and gun, Josh Giddey is not a guy that they want on there because he can't space the damn floor and everything gets stuck. So I believe his number is also in this 21 and a half points, assists, and rebounds. It was higher than that, I think, in the first game too, Merril, but he is not, and I mean not a guy that I think is going to see the floor a lot in this series against New Orleans because it's not a great matchup in it. And I'd be shocked if he's just not chucking up threes at some point because I don't think he's going to get a whole lot else. So I don't mind fading him. But if we're going to look at OKC guys to back, SGA has got to be over the top, right? So what are we going to look at for point wise here with Oklahoma City? Because I imagine it's going to be just so ridiculously juiced for anything SGA related in this one.
Yeah, something we have to point out about the Thunder, they played 11 guys in a playoff game, including 9 players in the first quarter. 9 players in the first quarter of a home game won the other night. They've done this all season. That's why they've been a very deep team. They've been a great point spread team for several years now for that reason. But you normally see the lineups, the rotations shorten and tighten in the postseason, and they have not shown any indication they're going to do that. Now, maybe they do because they barely won. But I don't think they are. The quotes I'm reading, they're going to keep doing it. Once again, 11 players played, and 8 of the 11 had 15 minutes or more. 9 of the 11 played right away in the first quarter. Of the 5 starters, they all played 32 minutes or more, except for Giddey, who you mentioned, had just 19 minutes. And he only got 6 shot attempts, only made 1 of them for 2 points. Giddey's now at 9.5. This is where it gets tricky for the odds makers. He routinely had double digits in 6 straight games, but for the last 5 games now, he's at 8 points or less. So I think you're onto something. The trend is not the friend if you're betting Giddey props over. And it's really not the friend if you're betting any OKC props over because so many guys are going to play. You probably have to stick to the starters. A guy I'll point out is not really known for his offense, though, is Dort. And I think he will continue to get a lot of minutes because he's so good defensively. He played almost 35 minutes in game 1. He only had 6 points, only took 6 shot attempts. He's at 10.5. He's had 6 and 5 the last 2 games, but he had double digits for 6 straight games before that to finish the regular season. And I just think the fact he's going to be on the floor so much, he might be worth a look for some over props just because they need him out there defensively, which means he's going to get a couple extra shot attempts as well.
Yeah. Do you happen to have a number for Chet, good old Chet here, point-wise? Yeah. Because, what is it, 14, somewhere in that ballpark? Where is he at?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him. I actually talked about him a little bit in my video overnight here on WagerTalk TV. Once again, I'm breaking down every NBA game every day for the entire postseason here for the next 2 months. Hit subscribe, hit the bell for instant alerts, deep dive into a lot of player props. And Holmgren is a guy that jumped out to me overnight just due to the fact that I think he's going to be heavy in the rotation also. And we look at his game 1, he was only 6 for 14 shooting, only got to the free throw line twice, and he still ended up with 15 points.
Yeah.
And like you said, his prop in that game was 15.5. It had been 14.5 the game before, and now it's 15.5 again. So I do think there's some upside to Holmgren, although with that said, he has had 15 or less now in 4 of his last 5 games. So it's probably priced where it should be, but I would still lean over with his prop.
Yeah, no, I like that too. And they've done a pretty good job. They're throwing everybody at SGA from a defensive standpoint. So, you know, Marshall, I believe, was there. Trey Murphy, Herb Jones. They're throwing everybody at SGA, and that has and Williams, Jalen Williams for that matter. So I think Holmgren is kind of going to be the odd man out. If Zion, you know, what would this line be if Zion was here? I'm just curious, Merril. How far apart are these teams if Zion's in this series? And which, by the way, he swears he still has a chance of coming back in.
Yeah, their point differential with him on off the court in the last year or so is actually negative. So you could actually make an argument the line should be 10 if he was playing, but I know it wouldn't be, obviously. Maybe a couple points lower. I mean, this is still a 1 versus 8. What's funny about it, New Orleans, though, is that they had the 6th best point differential in the league this year, and they're only 8th in their own conference. They were 28 and 14 on the road till recently. So they are a dangerous team. And you bring up a good point about Zion. If you look at a lot of the metrics, he's a good player. I'm not going to debate that, but they've played very well without him. In fact, after winning that must-win game against the Kings, that moved him to 8 and 5 straight up this year when he doesn't play. and that's right on pace with what their 48-32 record was. So there really has not been a big difference, points for, points against, win-loss percentage with or without him. Maybe that's another reason why we saw this line drop down to 7.5 after being 8.5 in game one.
Yeah, no, that's pretty actually impressive with him, because they dominated the boards without him on the court. Would have been interesting to see what they got now. Holmgren, by the way, I think I'm reading here, Holmgren's rebounds, 8.5, somewhere in that ballpark. He's gonna have to get some, because again, if you're giving them all these second chance points, yikes, that's going to be a problem here tonight. But the market certainly, and you think it's public, you think the public dog here is going to be not Miami tonight, but you think it's going to be New Orleans? Is that what you're starting to see in the market right now?
Yeah, I see public sentiment on both underdogs. It's funny. I just think people are leery to lay double digits in any sports. When I do my NFL video, we very rarely see the most public plays of the week be the double-digit favorite in the NFL. I've just come to realize that they just kind of stay away from those games. So I think more people, first of all, are betting the New Orleans OKC game, and I definitely see New Orleans as a public dog, which means if you're waiting closer to tip-off, I don't know if we'll maybe get a 7. I'm looking at the Circa right now in Las Vegas has plus 7.5, minus 115, which means they're getting close to going to a 7. So if you like New Orleans, I'd play it sooner than later. If you like OKC, you might want to wait. You might actually get a 7 by tip-off.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point too. I mean, Miami was only minus 15 for a couple of minutes before it started to get bought down, and I get it. It's a ton of points, despite the fact that they ran away easily there. How about the total in this game, Merril? What do you think? Do the unders continue to reign free here? We know OKC wants to get up and go. New Orleans, I thought, did a pretty good job of limiting them and their ability to get out and transition at points in this game. So what are you thinking here? Is it if OKC wins, are we looking at an over? Is that how correlated it is?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Joe. And as I mentioned, I am leaning OKC in this game. So I think you do lean over for that reason, because that's how they want to play. One of the best transition teams in the NBA, and that is the weakness for New Orleans, I believe, is their transition D. They really did ugly things up in that 43-43 first half. Both teams shot extremely poor for the game, don't forget, 44 and 38.5%, including 31 and 28 from three. So the pace was still there at times. They just couldn't make shots. So if they're hitting anywhere near their normal percentage, I look for a higher scoring game. And I think OKC is the side play, which obviously would dictate the over as the total play. And by the way, this is several points lower. It's about 4 to 5 points lower than the game one total. It's already dropped a couple points from the opener. So we're also getting some adjusted line value because of it.
Yeah, big time. Also, team totals that I am seeing right now is we got Pelicans team total right around 102.5, 109.5 for the Thunder is their team total. So again, the Pelicans, ironically enough, much better on the road, Merril, than they were at home this year. It's kind of crazy. So if there was to be a zigzag happening here, I didn't think there was that much separating these two teams when fully healthy. Obviously, Zion, styles make fights, right, Merril? And I thought New Orleans, especially on the road, would have been able to get one of the first two and bring it back home. And I thought OKC would have some success playing at New Orleans here. But it feels like if New Orleans has got to win this game, they got to keep them low scoring. They're not going to win a fight here, right? They're not going to win a firefight by any stretch.
Right. It's the same thing with Miami. That's why I said I thought Miami and the under were somewhat correlated. I think the Pelicans and under and the Thunder and over are both correlated as well, because both dogs are not only the 8 seeds, but they're both shorthanded. They're missing their best player. So you can't win a shootout in that case. So I do like Oklahoma City's team total over, though, since I lean towards the side and the total with them. The over 109.5 would obviously make a lot of sense, because that's combining both thoughts there.
Shout out to Money. You got to love the name right there. Money in the house, in the chat room there, hanging out on in YouTube Shorts with us. We appreciate you, my friend. He, too, is of the mindset that if they're going to get one, New Orleans, I believe tonight is going to be the game that they have to get here. Valanciunas, by the way, rebounds tonight. I saw the number at 10.5, Merril. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, first of all, I want to point out the game that maybe they should have gotten was when they lost by 2 on Sunday, though.
Right.
Let's not forget that. That
Yeah,
very well,
yeah.
in
Oh, yeah.
hindsight, we might look back on this series and be like, that's the one they had to get. And that's kind of one of the
Yep.
reasons I like Oklahoma City here tonight for that reason. As far as the rebound prop, I believe he had 20 in game one, just a monster
Yeah.
game. So you're always curious to see how they adjust. I take a real zigzag contrarian nature on the prop market. He closed, I think, at 8.5. And now it's 10 and a half, even 11 in some spots. So that's not only 2.5 rebounds higher, that's like 20% higher.
Exactly.
After 20 rebounds. So
yep.
Yeah, I'm not looking to play the under because he had 20 rebounds, but the value's gone at this point. Look, his total for the last 10 games was 8.5, 9.5, 8.5, 6.5, and now it's like 11. So it's been really priced high. And he still had 12 rebounds or less in every one of the previous 9 games. In fact, he had 10 rebounds or less for 8 straight, but he's had 12 and 20 the last 2. Your guess is as good as mine if he regresses back to the seasonal norm.
Yeah, it's got bumped up now, 10.5, and he was a big part of the reason why they were so dominant on the boards. Chet's going to have to step up. They're going to have to do a better job of limiting second chance points here for New Orleans. We do have some questions in the chat. Does he mean liking OKC? You mean laying the 7.5? Is that what you're talking about, Merril?
Yes, when I like them, I would not recommend playing the money line with any favorite in that price range. Money line is minus 300. I'd much rather play the minus 7.5. Look, most times, if you like a team in this price range, they're going to cover if they win. Now, on the other side, if you like a dog, whether it's the NFL, NBA, anything, I do recommend putting some of it on the money line. So if you like the Pelicans tonight, nothing wrong with playing some of that on plus 250. But yeah, if you're playing the favorites, you should play point spreads only. So if I like them, I'm talking point spread, not money line. If I say I like a dog, I'm usually talking point spread, but I definitely am not opposed to putting a little bit of that on plus money.
What kind of let's see what we got. S. Warrior in the house, Merril, and he is full on taking the dive with the Heat. He is repping the Heat in the chat room. Apparently, we all have to meet back here again tomorrow, so we can all hail to S. Warrior as the Celtics lose. I am with you, S. Warrior here. I do think, again, for those of you that are just joining us, I do think there's going to be a closer game here tonight in that first one between Boston and the Heat than maybe the line leads us to believe here. But I also think we're going to learn a little something really early in this game on whether or not that's going to be the case. If we take a quick look here, Merril, at some of these games coming up in the series, nothing's ever over until, what did Yogi say? It ain't over until some fat chick sings or something along those lines. But I may have quoted that wrong. But somewhere along the line there, somebody with girth has got to actually sing, I think, for it to be over. What is over, do you think, in the series here, some of these series that are underway?
Ain't over till it's over, unless the fat lady sings. That would have been a great. That would have been a great Yogi quote, actually.
Yep.
That would have been a good one, point. Actually, as if you'd said it that way. It's deja vu all over again. No one goes to that restaurant anymore because it's too crowded. That's the best line, and people don't get that. I say that to people so often. They're like, "That makes a lot of sense." I was like, "Just think about it for a moment. It's brilliant, brilliant." I tell you,
it really is.
The price on the Celtics right now is minus 20,000. That's 1 to 200. So you risk $200, you win $1. The problem is the split is so huge on these series odds. You're getting Miami like at 80 to 1. It's just a huge split. Actually, I'm sorry, 50 to 1. So it's a 150 cent, a 1,500 cent split. Anyway, you can get the series handicap, because what I was going to ask you as a diehard Heat fan, can Miami steal a game? They're likely not going to win outright as a 14-point dog. Could they steal one of them at home? Right now, Boston is minus 154 to win in 4 games. You can also take them on a minus 3.5 spread at minus 165, plus 130 comeback. So different ways to play that. I don't know. I lean Miami tonight plus the big number, but I don't think they're going to get a game, especially since they had a 3-0 lead on Boston and beat them last year. But I don't know. Maybe they could steal one at home if Boston comes in a little complacent.
Yep. Listen, like you said, they may not win, but I think continuing to lay 15 with Boston is going to be the Boston may win it, but I to me at this point, pray for Miami to come out strong, and you can get yourself a better number if you're looking to get Boston. We've seen this in a number of spots here. We also saw Kawhi come back last night, and we saw the market flip, which was hilarious too, even though he hadn't played he hadn't played any games for about a month, it feels like. And they had him coming off the bench, which I thought was interesting too in that game last night. The bottom line is Dallas did what they needed to do. They got one. Now they head back to Dallas. That certainly feels like a zigzag style series. Would you lean that way as well, Merril?
Yeah, a couple quick things on the zigzag. First of all, you want to use the modified zigzag. And what I mean by that is I have a preferred side in every series. And what I'm hoping to see, if I'm not involved with them in that game, is for them to lose, to be honest, because then it sets up a good bounce back spot. And I actually stayed off game one, even though I preferred the Mavericks in the series. So I was happy to see the Clippers win game one because I thought that set up a great play in the Mavericks in game two. And then, of course, after I released the play to my clients, best bet at WagerTalk.com, part of that perfect 5-0 start to the NBA playoffs. We see that Leonard's back, and now I put him out at -2.5. I could have gotten him at +1.5. And damn it. But as I also know, the adjusted line value continues to be a fade, or a play on, rather. The adjusted line value is a play on. You fade the team with the superstar in or out. And that was the case. And it was a little strange to me to see him come back because they got game one. It's not like they were in desperation mode, which tells me they think they are in desperation mode. So the Mavericks remain the preferred side for me. I don't like them as much off a win as I would off a loss. But, yeah, the fact they brought Leonard back, 35 minutes, only had 15 points, 0 for 5 from 3, only got to the free throw line twice. He's not fully there, and this could be a disruption going forward into game 3 as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I do think also, and Money brings it up, great call. It's amazing to me how good and efficient Kyrie has been this playoff, and we're not talking about it. I mean, down the stretch, Kyrie and Luka, because they didn't start the year off together. It was either one or the other, right? And then we're like, oh yeah, here we go with Kyrie again. He's never going to be available. But my goodness, with those two healthy and playing some games, and it's amazing to me, absolutely nobody talks about him, and yet he is dropping from all over the place, and a big part of that win again last night.
Yeah, if you look at NBA teams that have won championships for decades now, you look back in like the 80s, Isaiah Thomas, maybe Rodman as a supporting cast, Bill Laimbeer, but they had like one Hall of Famer on that team. The Bulls, Scottie Pippen, who, by the way, I think Pippen vastly overrated. I think had he not played with Jordan, he's not a Hall of Famer. That's just my opinion. Comment below in the live chat and the replay. Let me know your thoughts. But my point is, most of these teams that win titles have like a Hall of Famer and maybe an all-star borderline Hall of Famer, but you can't have 3 or 4 of them because there's only one basketball. There's not enough possessions. So it doesn't concern me that Doncic and Irving took, 44 of the 76 shot attempts the other night. They had 55 of the 96 points. That's actually what you want to see because maybe you could stop one of them, but then the other guy's going to be tough to stop. And Denver kind of qualifies as well with Jokic, and Jamal Murray had been banged up for a while. People forget how good Jamal Murray is coming back from surgery and whatnot. He's as good as anybody in the league, in my opinion, at the guard position. Denver has that same model with a bunch of other first-round picks spliced in. Dallas could go very far, and Dallas, if they do get by the Clippers, which I think they will, have a very favorable matchup against most likely Oklahoma City, a very shaky 1 seed who has no playoff experience. And then they avoid either Minnesota or Denver till the conference finals. So setting up pretty well for Dallas. And you're right, Joe. People forget how slow they started, but they're playing as well as anybody. Them and the Warriors, the 2 hottest teams down the stretch, and they're the only one remaining. But a lot of upside for Dallas.
I love it. Yeah, and by the way, it did flip. I believe Tyler in the chat room there saying +145. He grabbed Dallas before the game yesterday. They are now laying -140, 145 to win the series. Clippers at +115. But you can get Dallas 4-2 at +275. Clippers at 4-2 at about 6-1. Merril, somewhere in that ballpark. And this is going to happen if Clippers go and win the next game, it's going to flip, and we're going to keep going vice versa here. So if you like the Clippers, maybe now's the time to jump in on them. If not, Wait until they win the next game and then jump in on Dallas if you want to go the other way. That's the beauty of some of these evenly matched teams, that they just exchange wins in this spot.
You can also, I see a spread price now actually has the Clippers favored, surprisingly, -1.5, but they're plus 260. Dallas plus 1.5 is like minus 360. So that tells you, once again, the odds makers think Dallas is the better team. And I'm not sure why they have the Clippers price. I guess because they won game one, they probably set a line after that. Now they're adjusting the money on it. But Dallas remains my preferred side in this series. I like them as a strong best bet in game two, and most likely will be looking to use them whenever they're coming off a loss, if that happens again in this series.
So just to, for those of you joining us here for the first time, just we just want to let you know, we do have a recovering Philadelphia fan behind the scenes, and Dan Alexander. So we want to rip the Band-Aid off of him so he doesn't have to deal with the idea that Embiid is going to do anything except go back to the locker room and play half a game moving forward. What is it, Merril? 4, maybe? I see 4, 5. The Knicks. What do you give Philadelphia's chances of getting at least 2 wins in this, taking it to 6 games?
Well, their chances are good because they could very easily be up 2-0 in this series, and probably should be at least 1-1 at worst. And the question becomes, how do they rebound after blowing that game 2? I think, what was it? The Knicks scored 8 points in the last 28 seconds, I believe. So it's just inexcusable. They don't call a timeout when Maxey gets into trouble in the backcourt. Nick Nurse, don't forget, won the world title in 19, and then he got let go a few years later. He's shaky on the sidelines, in my opinion. But they get to return home to the city of not-so-brotherly love, and this will be a make-or-break game for them. And home team's down 0-2. We'll talk a lot about this tomorrow. All 3 games tomorrow and Thursday have Game 3 home teams down 0-2. Ralph Michaels will be on with you and me tomorrow.
That's crazy.
So I'm looking for, he's going to have some great data on this.
That's worked.
And we know the first half lines. Yeah, so we'll talk a lot about this on Thursday. And by the way, I've already recorded my Thursday video because I've got 3 best bets up already for Thursday, also a Friday game. So lots of advanced best bets on my page at WagerTalk. And the video for Thursday has been recorded. Look forward to later this evening. It'll be up a little bit earlier than normal. So really good information on these games.
Great stuff, guys. Make sure you check out the links below here for all of Merril's way to go here. We'll go a couple of quick questions in the chat room here. I do think, let's see here. Derek White's props for today from Christian Kim. He's been over the points line, 13.5 in 4 out of the last 5, 29 or more minutes here. I would much prefer to look at Derek White than I would at Tatum. I'll tell you that right now. And I know there's some thoughts here, some questions about Brown as well, and what kind of effort and what kind of game we're going to get from him. I mean, there has been a history of, Tatum maybe sometimes disappearing against Miami. It just, Miami is sometimes a bad matchup for him in this spot. But especially when they won the first 3 games of the series last year, it was like anybody see Tatum here. But I think Derek White is a guy that the market's not paying enough attention to, that if this is going to be a blowout, Merril, he's a guy is probably going to be a little bit undervalued.
Yeah, Tatum had a triple-double in game 1, and he still went under his point total. In fact, he's gone under his point total now 7 straight games, including with the triple-double. So I'm in no hurry to bet his over after a triple-double, and he still stayed under his point total. And you got to figure guys are going to key on him more because of that. So I would agree with you. I think the other role players, secondary players, and Tatum does have a tendency to zigzag. We talk about zigzags. Yes. He's an example of that. Just look at his last 5 games, 23-18, 22-17, 24. He's alternated under and over 20 points, and his total's at 25.5. So in no hurry to bet Tatum props over tonight.
I am with you, and I think Jaylen Brown, steady Eddie, but he's probably overvalued at this particular point anyway. I mean, he's the most, the most all-around as far as I'm concerned. At least some of the guy has been the most consistent that we can always count on in these spots here. I would much rather go at White, and I think Porzingis is just going to hang out making a whole lot of threes in the game too as well. I think Porzingis is probably a guy, because of Brown and Tatum, that gets overlooked here in this spot.
Yeah, how crazy is this? Well, I talk about Tatum having the triple-double and staying under his point total. He led the team in scoring. They had 114 points. He was the team's leading scorer, and he still stayed under his point total with just 23. And of the 5 starters, every starter had a plus minus of 13 or better. 3 of the 5, 17 or better. Tatum's plus minus was 3. So it's really kind of bizarre. It's another reason why I'd be very careful with Tatum props over. Just too inconsistent for my taste.
I agree. Al Horford rebounds 5.5. I know there were some questions about how Horford will go here. I thought, again, I mean, who's Horford going to have to beat in there? I thought the lineup was interesting when they went with the bigs out on the court against the small lineup against Miami. But again, I thought Miami did a pretty good job inside the paint defensively there. So Horford is a guy I think that may very well also be hit or miss in this series.
Yeah, he missed a couple games over the last 9, but he's only had more than 6 rebounds once, and that was the 7 that he had in game 1. It's around 5.5, so I think it's probably pretty much priced right.
Yeah, and we do have one other one coming, the Saline 786 tonight, one night only. Take the Oklahoma City 6.5 by a point. So, Merril, are we buying points in the NBA these days?
No, we're not buying points in the history of sports betting since I've been alive I've been alive for more than 30 years, but since I've been doing this for 30 years. First of all, as I said earlier, there probably will be a rogue 7 out there by tip-off because the Pelicans are very public. So you're getting a half a point for free if you just shop around and wait, and then at worst you get a push. So there's no need to buy points. I would say have multiple sportsbook accounts, so there's no reason not to split your deposit, your bankroll up over 5 accounts, and try to get those free half points almost every day you'll find it. So instead of buying points, I like the free half points.
Yep. I'm with you there. I mean, that's what live betting is all about, guys. Give it 5 minutes. You'll save yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. I mean, 90% chance you will have a 6.5 at some point in that game, probably live betting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't do it to yourself. Don't waste the money. Preserve that bankroll. Adam Yanza, I love this, and I completely screwed that up there, but big shout out. Boston, Miami, 205 over. Pelicans today as well. And Money says, listen, if you guys ain't got $50 laying around to put it on the Lakers to win the series at plus 900, oh boy. I'm just curious. Is it 900? I thought it was, is it 9-1? I thought the Lakers price was higher than that.
Well, all I was going to say is if you ain't got it laying around now, you definitely won't in a week or so if you make that bet.
Oh, man. We love you, Money. Listen, Laker faithful, love them. They are, without a doubt, going to stand by them. Last one, Merril. Do we think the Lakers get at least one at home?
Well, yeah. I mean, the odds are they will. It's a pick 'em in game 3 tomorrow night.
Yep.
And then they get another game after that. What's interesting, though, we'll talk more about this tomorrow on Thursday. I've got it in my video, by the way, which will be up tonight, so watch that. But I couldn't help resist talking about how the first half lines are sometimes more than the full game line. We see that a lot in these game 3s now. The Lakers are anywhere from pick to +1, so they're a home dog now at some books, yet they're -1.5 first half. I mean, that is one of the rarest things you'll ever see. That's a solar eclipse of sports betting to see a team underdog for the game, yet favored in the first half. So it just shows how people think the Lakers come out strong, but how do they not think that? Because they've fallen apart in games 1 and 2 with double-digit leads in the first half and lost them both. So, they have been a team that's aged down the stretch. And LeBron looked really good at the beginning of game 2, by the way, but obviously fatigue is not a friend of his either.
All right, big shout out to Ayo in the house. He wants to remind everyone, Pistons in 5, people. Pistons in 5.
Yes. No zone defense allowed with that play.
Oh, no zone in that.
We got in our hot tub
there,
time
guys.
machine. Had a little chlorine. There we go.
I love it. It's only 9 plus 900 until the next game. That's a good job, Best Dot Warrior. Listen, we got a lot more NBA stuff to talk about. Like Steve said, tomorrow we'll have Ralph Michael, the Pen will be here with his trends and angles for everything that's been going on. We'll have the games tomorrow to break down. I certainly hope you'll hit the thumbs up for us here today and make plans. Maybe hit that little bell in the upper right-hand corner. Those of you joining us on YouTube here, and come and hang out with us as we've got plenty more NBA basketball to talk about here until we crown a champion. You guys have been absolutely phenomenal. We wish you the very best here tonight. Let's cash a few tickets. And don't forget to come back and join us again tomorrow so we can do it once again. Shout out to those of you in Instagram along with X here today, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, and of course, you YouTube lunatics. We appreciate you guys very, very much. Best of luck with the plays tonight. Come back and join us again tomorrow. We'll do it once again. Good luck.